French President Macron has been in the news over the last month or so, mainly because his country's burning to the ground because he raised the retirement age. But he's in the news again for visiting President Xi in China, no doubt to say, hey, stop your flexing around Taiwan. Actually, that's not why he went. He went there to essentially make nice with President Xi. And you got to ask yourself, why all this geopolitical shifting away from the United States is happening all at the same time? Maybe it's because the United States can't ensure what it used to ensure, which is political and geopolitical stability around the world. Maybe it's because the United States is causing some of the instability around the world. So, as one does, these countries look for things in their own best interest. And if that's not with the United States, they look elsewhere, even to the CCP, which stands for what again? Chinese Communist Party. Communism. I think that has a pretty bad track record. But let's take a look at what's going on with Macron and Xi. So Macron went and had a couple of romantic hours with President Xi. It says here at the top, Macron says Europe should reduce dependence on U.S. dollar, seek strategic autonomy. Like I said, I think most of this is coming from self-preservation more than anything else. What happened in the last year that would cause Macron to do this? Where's their energy come from? Where's a lot of their energy come from? That's right, Russia. And so there's all kinds of sanctions. And who's it hurting the most? Europe, big time. Their energy costs have gone through the roof. They do have certain energy stores, but they're looking for this next winter and they're like, uh-oh, we're screwed. We do not have the supply to keep people warm, and the price keeps going up, and we have people burning down our country because we have to raise the retirement age because we don't have any inflows of energy and we don't take in enough in taxes. Things are falling apart within their country. They got to look for stability, and they ain't getting it from America. So it says here, as the United States combat a recent flood of countries de-dollarizing, trading commodities, and like I said before, this doesn't happen overnight, but this is definitely a trend that's not good for the United States dollar. It'll take a decade or so, but that doesn't mean that as the dollar and the DXY keeps going down and down and down, that the United States isn't going to feel it. But it can't happen overnight where people just go, okay, we're not using the dollar anymore because there's a lot of debt in dollars around the world, not issued by the United States, but in the euro-dollar system. So de-dollarizing, trading commodities and other currencies, the last thing that was needed was French President Emmanuel Macron amplifying this message. After spending about 6 hours with Chinese President Xi Jinping as part of a 3-day visit to China, Macron made it extremely clear that France wants nothing to do with World War III, so that's good. Emphasizing that Europe must employ strategic autonomy, presumably led by France, to become a third superpower, according to Politico. So you got to think to yourself, what is Macron? He's part of NATO. He is part of NATO. Why are they trying to become independent of the United States? Because the United States really leads NATO. So if the United States says jump, NATO says how high, and that has happened in Ukraine. So what is it about Ukraine that's making Macron look and go, hey, wait a second, these guys want the fight, potentially, the United States. And France doesn't want any part of World War III. So they see what's going on in Ukraine, which is a NATO-pushed thing, America pushed. From the defense side, obviously Russia invaded, but when it comes to NATO's reaction, that is an American-pushed agenda. So the sanctions, lack of energy in France, he's probably seeing that there is no path to victory for NATO. And then he's seeing Chapter 2, which is the United States playing footsie with China over Taiwan. and he doesn't want any part of that. So, can't say I blame him, but again, Chinese Communist Party. You have two bad people. They don't. Everyone wants a narrative. Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? But sometimes there's two bad people that have selfish motives. Okay. All right. So he says that we want to keep our strategic and or autonomy. He was quoted as saying, "We are in a jungle and we have two big elephants trying to become more and or who are becoming more and more nervous. If they become very nervous and start a war, it will be a big problem for the rest of the jungle. You need to cooperation of a lot of animals, tigers, monkeys, and so on." China agrees. China agrees. So he said further, the paradox would be that overcome with panic, we believe just America's followers, said Macron. The question Europe needs to answer, is it in our interest to accelerate a crisis on Taiwan? No. So he sees that the rhetoric is heating up. He sees the resources that have been dedicated to the Ukrainian war, and he doesn't want any part of it. The worst thing would be to think that we Europeans must become followers on this topic and take our cue from the US agenda, NATO, and a Chinese overreaction. So he's going to Xi and saying, hey, look, I know you guys aren't best friends with America. We don't really like them either. We don't want any part of it. We want to be your friend. We kind of want to be their friend. We don't want to play in this fight. Just hours after his flight left Zhangzhou, headed back to Paris, China launched a large military exercise around the self-ruled island of Taiwan. They surrounded it with their navy, which China claims it's his own territory, but the U.S. has promised to arm and defend. That said, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has accompanied Macron and stressed the stability of the region, telling Xi during the meeting last Thursday in Beijing that the threat of use of force to change the status quo is unacceptable. So you got the European Commissioner, Ursula von der Leyen, saying one thing, and Macron, who is operating in the self-interest of himself and his country, is saying, oh, I don't know if France wants any part of this. By the way, this leads back to what I was saying before. The EU, I think it'd be the EU of today in 10 years. It's not. For financial reasons, for geopolitical reasons, energy reasons, the fact that Germany carries most of the EU as far as exports, so their work is carrying most of the burden. They don't want to do that forever. So, according to the report, Xi responded by calling anyone who thought they could influence the CCP on Taiwan deluded. He has openly said that Taiwan will be part of China. So, superpower China saying we want Taiwan, superpower the United States saying you ain't getting Taiwan. What does that mean? What does that mean to France? He's probably taking the smartest strategic position, which is, hey, we'll just be in the middle. We don't want to pick sides because they know it's a lose-lose for them. All right, so it says Xi was visibly annoyed for being held responsible for the Ukraine conflict and downplayed that from his recent visit to Moscow. Said one source who was present in the room, he is clearly enraged by the U.S. and very upset over Taiwan. By the Taiwanese president's transit through the U.S. and the fact that foreign policy issues were being raised by Europeans. In the meeting, Macron and von der Leyen took similar lines on Taiwan, but Macron subsequently spent more than 4 hours with the Chinese leader, of which only a translator was present, and his tone was far more conciliatory than von der Leyen's in regards to Taiwan. Like, oh, we don't want any part of this. So, why is all this happening you're like me, you're like, hey, seem to have a fairly stable geopolitical world order, and everything seems to be changing all at once, or at least the rhetoric is changing. The stability that we have had in the last 2 decades was a facade. And I think every leader around the world realizes, and the people at Davos also realize that the path we are on in the West is doomed to fail. I'm talking with our debt. It's doomed to fail. And when that happens, really bad things happen within those countries. People get pissed, there's social unrest, there's revolution, etc. And they realize we're weak in the West. The world order has been funded by debt. The world order has been funded by the dollar being the world reserve currency. And they don't want that debt anymore, number one. So this trend is going to continue. And as I've said before, how do you compete with a communist party? You outcompete them with freedom, free market capitalism. But what we're trying to do instead in the West is kind of low-key copy the CCP. We're trying to have socialism light. Look at the story I did about cities a couple days ago. Some of the regulations we have in this country. We're just like, hey, CCP's bad because they're communists and they do this and this and this to their people. Maybe we could try that, like 20% of it, see if we outcompete them. A free market will always outcompete a controlled top-down market, but we're not a free market. So we're not competing with them on a world stage where our entrepreneurs in this country would crush the entrepreneurs in China, because the entrepreneurs in China have to constantly look over their shoulder like, the CCP gonna like this? Maybe I shouldn't do this. But if you have a free market, that will always dominate a top-down, centrally controlled market. But we're not doing that. We're not providing more exports. We're just, whipping our military out on the table and like, F around and find out, which our military is funded by the world reserve currency and debt. So what if we don't have the world reserve currency and no one wants to buy our debt? Not good. A lot of shifting going on. Presidents in NATO are now going, maybe I don't want to help either of these sides. Love to know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think the United States is the aggressor around the world? Because the last decade, we have been. We've been the guys who go, hey, maybe you shouldn't invade a sovereign country. And then they go, wait a second, you've invaded like 7 sovereign countries in the last decade. Like, oh yeah. Well, we're the United States. We can do whatever we want. And these countries are saying, well, no, you can't. No, you can't. You're done. And if we don't get our act together and say, hey, you know what? These people are trying to take the power of the dollar and the world's greatest military, which is funded by the dollar, away. If they take that away overnight, it's not going to happen overnight, but if that goes away, we've got nothing else. We don't export anything. We're like, hey, you want to see our TikTok stars? We got that. We've got social media companies, but we don't export much. And we're still trying to shoot ourselves in the foot by not exporting energy. All right. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. See y'all in the next one. Peace.